Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randle and Gus Kearns.
Welcome back to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we continue on the train to preview each and every one of the 357 teams. I'm your host, Mike Randle. Please follow me on Twitter at RandleRand. Today, we are blessed to have Associate Head Coach of St. Joe's, Coach John Griffin, with us. John Griffin has a tremendous background. Coach has so much work with analytics, players, different teams. He's one of the top associate head coaches in the country, and he stops his very busy schedule with recruiting and everything going on to join us here for a few minutes on the podcast. Coach Griffin, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing?
Mike, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be speaking about college basketball.
John, one of the things that I love is talking about the path. Growing up, we are college basketball hoops junkies here. We dreamt of coaching. We dreamt of being in the situation that you're in right now. Talk about your path. It's very interesting how you got to the point you're at right now and where you are with the Hawks.
So I'm a son of a coach, college basketball coach. My father was the head coach at Siena College in the early 80s, and then he became the head coach at St. Joe's, where I'm working now, in the early 90s. So I was born into the business. Took a little bit of an interesting route to get to where I'm currently sitting, but essentially fell in love with the game of basketball, fell in love with playing the game of basketball, and had some amazing experiences with being with the coaches that I played for, which has kind of inspired the way that I act today, to this date. So grew up in Philadelphia, played basketball at a high school in Philadelphia, St. Joseph's Prep, where our head coach was a guy by the name of William Speedy Marsh. Speedy Marsh is a renowned basketball coach in the world of college basketball, but especially in the city of Philadelphia. Then went on to play at Bucknell University, played for a very high-level schematic basketball coach named Pat Flannery, who won a national championship Division III and is also very well known for his X's and O's and his successes in college basketball. So those two guys really, provided me the idea of being a basketball coach because of the way they carried themselves, how they impacted their players. And really, a lot of times when you think about the people that have impacted you in life, you revert back to teachers and coaches. And those two were great ambassadors in my mind for the world of coaching. But as I mentioned, I love the game. So I continued to play for as long as I could. I played in Germany first year out of college. I tore my ACL. I didn't want to give up the dream. So worked my way back after 9 months to continue playing and landed in Bratislava, Slovakia. Did not play very well, was not healthy enough to move. And I'm already limited athletically. So I need all my parts working.
Every advantage,
and
sure. Yes.
Need it all. Like I can't give anything up. So came back and had a little bit of a moment, what's next? My father went from coaching to the world of finance. Being a Bucknell student, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my classmates moved on into the world of finance, whether it be New York or San Francisco, Chicago, et cetera. So that idea did interest me. But the most natural kind of growth and the natural progression for me was in the world of basketball. And so I went through the interview process with a couple graduate assistant positions and through a network that existed because of my father. Jim O'Brien was the head coach of the Indiana Pacers. He called and asked, would you have interest in being a video coordinator? I had really no idea what that was at the time, but I was very intrigued by the business of the NBA. It was something that I was always looking from the outside in on, and I wanted to see how it worked, what it looked like, what it felt like. And so I went out there and in July to try out with the summer league to see if it was a right fit. He was very gracious in letting me figure out if it was the right fit, and accepted the job and became the lowest man on the totem pole in an NBA organization. And it kind of just set the tone for my career. Now, I was only there for 1 year. People always ask me why I left, but that end of that year was an NBA lockout. So I had to kind of pivot because most of the support staff wasn't really retained unless they had been there for a certain number of years. And so I had to pivot. I ended up continuing my playing career because I was given advice actually from Dave Paulson, who was the head coach at Bucknell at the time. don't get into coaching until you're finished playing. That resonated quite a bit with me. And so I had to just check that box. Did it for 5 months, played in England, hit Italy, came home. And very fortunately, I got my first opportunity in the college space as the director of operations at Rider. Went from Rider, where I spent 3 great years, to Bucknell, and now here I am at St. Joe's. So that was the quickest way I could tell you my career path as to where I am right now. I've had a number of unbelievable stops, but more importantly, I've been around really high-level people. And as it relates to the college basketball space, I've been a part of 3 different head coach first 100 days, which is a little bit unique in that you maybe see it once or twice when you move from spot to spot. It's been an eye-opening experience each spot that I've been, where we're taking over a program and it's our first day, month, year. So we're at a good space right now here at St. Joe's. I'm excited about the upcoming year, but that is my career path. It's got a number of different turns and it's landed me here.
Coach, that's a great background story. And so many other coaches have that path about hard work, working their way up, being a player, going overseas. I'm curious how your experience has affected the style of play at St. Joe's, specifically with three-point shooting. Obviously, three-point shooting has taken over the game. And at St. Joe's last year, you played with great tempo. You were the fastest paced team in tempo in the Atlantic 10. I would think, did you see that change coming in your playing days, sort of coming overseas, coming back, working with different coaches, NBA? How has that transformed the game? Because the three-point shot now is an integral part of what every team does, especially with St. Joe's.
Our head coach, Billy Lang, was with the 76ers for 6 years, from the beginning of Trust the Process to, 2 years ago. And they started with the general manager, Sam Hinkie, who is very notably known for his appreciation for analytics. Mm-hmm. And analytics is, there's so many fine details to it, depending on what level you're working in, whether it be in the NBA. Obviously, we just had the Olympics, and the European model is built around three-point shooting, spacing, layups, more so than individual one-on-one play. So when we got here, we had to figure out a style that would be, 1, fun, but 2, give us an opportunity to win a national championship. Mm-hmm. And we used the model that has been more and more, I would say, utilized in the NBA now in terms of the spacing element. And we really locked in on building it from the bottom up. It sounds fun, taking a lot of threes, playing with speed, but it can be a challenge because you're giving an amount of freedom that's unusual for college basketball. You have to really fine tune it through a lot of film study and really learning how to play in a structured but non-structured environment where you're more playing 5-on-5, 5-on-4, creating advantages for the offense. It's got a little bit of like a European soccer feel where you're doing drills where you're trying to get the ball moving from person to person quickly, and they have to make decisions at a speed that they're maybe not normally used to making those decisions. So I didn't see it as much. I learned it a little bit during my European playing days because they didn't like, depending on where your coach is from, Eastern or Western Europe, they don't really like dribbling as much. Very true. I could see the game really changing to this more European style. But at Bucknell, we focused in, and part of our philosophy was making passes to the perimeter to get three-point opportunities. Mm-hmm. Some people focus on getting to the rim. Ours was getting towards the paint and making the right decision that would get it to the perimeter that ultimately result in a 3. And so I was aligned with Coach Lang's philosophy in that regard. We didn't have any traditional 5 men here when we arrived. And so we had to make an offense that fit our roster. And fortunately for us, our roster fit our style, which doesn't normally happen. You might have to adjust. And so, yeah, we've basically just built it from the bottom up, where we've had to live with some bad shooting days. We've had to live with some bad decisions because of the freedom that we're giving to our players. But then at the same time, we've also noticed that there is a general understanding now, with a little bit of a core that we have, that is not necessarily a robotic style of play. That's fun. It gives energy to the group that's on the floor. It gives energy to the group that's sitting on the bench, the fans, the people. But it just takes time. So long story short there, it's Coach Lang had an idea, and we've just stuck to the philosophy of creating a spacing element that would provide opportunities. And then from there, existing through the difficult and the challenges of giving that freedom. And now we're kind of on the other side of it, where they have an understanding of where they're going to get their shots from and when they're going to get it.
What's impressive, Coach, is last year, everyone had issues, struggling, COVID quarantines. I always felt watching you, and we're based out of New Jersey, so we watch you guys a lot. I'm like, this team is dangerous. They're going to get it together. It's coming. You can see the potential. And all of a sudden, after I think you guys came out of a pretty big quarantine, here we go. After your game on January 30th against Duquesne, February 20th, you beat LaSalle overtime. February 24th, you beat Dayton. March 1st, you beat Richmond. Then you beat LaSalle again in the tournament. What changed? Because so many teams, I've talked to coaches, came out of the COVID pause or sort of delays and went the other way. It seems like things really got clicking for you. Finally got health, and you were starting to roll there at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the COVID pauses were challenging. So I'm sure that's going to be a consistent theme when you talk to coaches from this past year. Depending on your university, what their policies and procedures for COVID were, made it even harder. For us, the second pause, we learned so much in the first pause because we had a lot of injuries. So we had two significant pauses. The first pause is the first time going through something like this on so many different levels, but specific to keeping the players mentally engaged, keeping their bodies from completely atrophying, and potentially starting over while you're really in the beginning of the heart of the season was a challenge. You know, it's everything is via Zoom. There's liability issues. There's so many hurdles to jump in order to keep these guys engaged. So we learned a lot from that first, and we lost a lot of games coming out of that first pause. Mm-hmm. And it was psychologically, it impacted our guys and made it hard at times to overcome. Now and our staff will do this. Our staff will give our players 98% of the credit because they kept a certain energy level throughout the difficulties of our losses. And it allowed us to continue to coach them at a certain level where we didn't have to really spend a lot of energy creating an emotional positivity for the group. That was very much saving for us because it already took enough energy to get onto the practice floor. So coming out of the second pause, it allowed us to reset, get back to our basics, recognize that the year hadn't gone the way that we all wanted it to go, but the season wasn't over. On top of that, we had the leading scorer in the league who had been injured, broke his thumb. Yep. Ryan Daly, if you look at the just straight points per game, very impactful, but he was also a ball handler for us. Mm-hmm. And it allowed us to have multiple guys that can make decisions, passing, the dribbling, pick and roll offense, whatever it was, that gave us a little bit more of a dynamic offensive look. And so coming out of it, the first game was a huge one. We beat LaSalle at home. And from there was a program confidence that prior, let's just say we called it the previous season before the COVID,
right, sure. Yes.
Didn't exist. And there was a general commitment to connecting with one another. And we made some shots. It always helps, but it allowed us to reset in a very healthy way while in a current season. And like you said, getting healthy, major piece to the puzzle. And we saw some positive results. It's really great for the guys because we lost 10 games in a row. That's hard. It was hard. It's hard. And it's hard to win like from a psychological standpoint when the idea of winning hasn't really been around. So the guys did a great job. I mean, like I said, we didn't have to battle this negativity, positivity mountain that a lot of people had to climb.
Coach, talk about how the staff together at St. Joe's goes out and looks for players to fit your style. That's something I think the average fan doesn't understand. You've come in, you have a philosophy, you have a vision of how you want to play. Talk about the process and then talk about how that applies to some of the new players coming in this year, either transfers or incoming freshmen.
We build player profiles. We are very thorough in our recruitment process. At times, college basketball can be a little bit FOMO-like, where they follow one another based on what they see on social media, et cetera. We are a deep diving staff. We want to make sure that we know the people that we're recruiting as well as what we see optically. And we try to build out a combination of a character bio and a data skill set bio. Because we shoot a lot of threes, shooting is a priority. But then there's also a general level of athleticism, a general level of decision-making, the speed of the decisions that are being made, and then overall talent, So optics, when you're watching, you can see whether a player has a particular skill set. You got to combine that with the data of, do they make threes, or did we just see a outlying game where they made a couple threes? And you have to make sure that you do enough homework. A lot of the homework that we've done in the last 15 months has been via Zoom, not Zoom, but it's been via film. Film has positives, pros and cons. The pros is that you can get as many game films as you'd like, whatever's available, and you can really break it down and be very detailed as to the specifics that you're looking for in a player. The challenge, the con, is that you don't know the heights or really the general athleticism that's existing in the game, because it's really challenging to really see that unless you're courtside. We look for shooting. We look for particular height. We have a very tall team that is our roster for this upcoming year. And we're going to try to continue to build a roster that has a certain height level to it on average. And like I said, we play a style play that you have to have a general understanding for the game. There are outliers, of course. If Kevin Durant wants to come to St. Joe's, Kevin Durant can come to St. Joe's. He can bring it up and he can shoot it and he can do whatever he wants. But we're looking for, speed of decisions. We're looking for, obviously, the coaching cliche of being a good teammate and being the first on the floor and all that stuff that every coach wants in a player. But from a talent perspective, shooting, decision-making, and then, of course, just overall talent.
And I would think that would apply nicely for the players you have coming back. One of the key guys, of course, Coach, Jordan Hall, who withdrew from the NBA draft and is returning. So talk about how that applies to your players coming in, new and any transfers.
Yeah, so Jordan Hall had a great freshman campaign. Led the country in assists for freshmen. Part of it was our style of play gave him the opportunity to make decisions with a very particular spacing, and he took it by the reins and went with it. And Jordan is passionate about the game. He aspires to be a professional basketball player. Mm-hmm. And, the NBA draft process was very healthy for him. He learned quite a bit about himself. He learned what NBA teams think of him in his current state. And so him returning gives us just another element of our core that we believe will help us win games. We have two guys on our team right now that are transfers that are bigs. One is from East Carolina and Charles Coleman. The other one's from Vanderbilt and Ejike Obinna. Both will provide an interior presence that we haven't had. That they have game experience. They both started a number of games. They both have differing skill sets. They're both very physical, and they're both high character kids that love basketball. And I think that addition, along with our freshmen that we have that will also be playing, and we have a kid from Maryland. His name is Eric Reynolds, very dynamic guard, can shoot, he's very quick, commits to the defensive end. And we have a Polish kid that was in New York. That's a very physical throwback small forward that will have an impact on both sides of the ball because of his physicality and overall athleticism. So we are a taller team. I don't know our average height, but it's probably around 6'6". And that will be impactful for us on the defensive end. Our biggest hurdle will be consistency. And I think that our core, because we have guys that have been here now for at least a year, which, core is now changing because of the transfer portal. It's probably a 2-year as opposed to a 4-year core, but still impactful because they'll know our terminology. We won't have to spend a lot of time on the schematics of the defense and the offense because we have guys already that have been in the system. So we're excited about it. It will help us be a little bit further along earlier in the season from a scheme standpoint. And getting over that first hurdle of game one will hopefully get us on the right path.
Now, Coach, St. Joe's going to be one of the most exciting teams to watch here in the country on offense. I would think the transfers provide a unique sort of adaptation that has to occur because normally you have your core guys coming in and you have newbies. Now you have players coming in with experience trying to meld them together. Talk about the challenges and the differences there because you have high expectations. You have an exciting team. You have players returning. You have a style that's unique that other teams are going to have to adapt to. So I think there's a lot of potential here, but there's sort of that new challenge with this transfer portal that everyone's talking about where you have players coming in. They're experienced players now. It's not just players coming in from high school, and I would think that would be a little different.
It is. It's got a little bit more of a free agency feel to it.
Yes.
It's a plug and play type of model right now where there are players with significant game experience coming to different programs. I think the install for a transfer and the install for a freshman on offense and defense really are the same. Terminology changes, spacing and movement pattern changes are all things that all these players are going to have to learn. Specific to us, because we value spacing so much as it relates to our offense, it's actually exciting for some of these transfers to look at our style of play and see themselves in it.
Yep.
And what we've seen with our 2 transfers is they really enjoy the growing process of learning where to be on the floor. That's not necessarily what they are accustomed to doing. It's not as traditional as they've been a part of when it comes to offense and defense. And so that's something new that from our vantage point as a staff, we're seeing that they love it. Our transfers are really excited to be a part of it. And we're fine tuning it a little bit with our interior players being a part of this spacing so that they are able to take advantage of our offensive scheme and be very productive. And again, it's most traditional programs with 5 men that are at a certain height. They're limited in their movement patterns. They're given a specific role and specific, almost like follow the line, set a screen, and roll to the rim. And in some cases, it's very productive. In other cases, they never touch the ball. Yep. So for us, we're really trying to include them, but help them grow and understand the game so that they can be productive. And it's been, so far, there's been some challenges, but you can see the general excitement that they know they're involved. Yep. And they know that their involvement, if they want to play professionally, is going to help them adjust quicker to now the overall professional style of play.
Coach, this has been incredible insight. I could talk to you for 2 more hours. Just one more question, then I'll get you out of here.
Yeah, no, this is great.
This has been amazing about the insight, about the game, about the team, about philosophies. I'm curious, how did you put together your non-conference schedule? Because look, last year you guys just jumped into the deep end of the pool. You went Auburn, Kansas, Drexel, Villanova, of course, Tennessee, VCU, Rhode Island, St. Bonnie's, and away we go. So, that could have been a result of some cancellation things. I understand that, but I would think you would like a balance and you would like to have a schedule. I like your non-conference this year. You have some good games. You have some competitive games across the board. Talk about how the coaching staff goes through setting up the non-conference and how you went into this season.
Well, it's all predicated on the philosophy of the head coach. So Coach Lang took the job at St. Joe's with a national championship goal in mind. Mm-hmm. And he is unapologetic about that approach to being the head coach at St. Joe's. And I am aligned with him on that. I agree on that front. Last year, the schedule was built the way it was with, like you said, some COVID-related situations. Scheduling last year was as unique as
Yes.
it will ever be.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, we had situations where we're setting up games on planes, flying home to play a couple days later because of cancellations. And for that reason, we weren't supposed to play Villanova. Mm-hmm. And that game had been canceled because of our COVID situation. And then Villanova had a cancellation, and then we slotted it in there with Tennessee right behind it. Yeah. So it really was not for record purposes or anything along those lines. It was for the mental health of our players that they could just play games.
Sure.
But we are taking the model of anywhere, any place, anytime, so that people now recognize, and St. Joe's has a great history. Yeah. And they have had great players come through here. We have 3 NBA players right now, which is the most in the Atlantic 10 in its current state. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that the nation of college basketball, although we don't have the SEC logo, that they recognize who we are. So we built a schedule this upcoming year with balance. We always have the Big Five built in. Very tough games, regardless of record. Always. There's a city rivalry emotionally that makes it completely different. Mm-hmm. So that's already built in. It's a great addition to our schedule. But being involved in the Wooden legacy with ESPN running it is a big deal for us because we want to make sure that we're putting ourselves on a platform to get national exposure. We feel that we have a program that is high major and we are capable of existing in that space and balancing it out with home games. I mean, the biggest thing for us too is we have a great fan base and we want to make sure that we play in front of them. So we were able to find a good balance, as you said, of games in front of our fans, our very passionate fans here at St. Joe's, and also putting ourselves in a national light where people recognize that we're a high-level program that produces NBA players and can make runs in the NCAA tournament.
Folks, I mean, Coach John Griffin, associate head coach at St. Joe's, one of the best in the business, just gave you not only a preview of this year, but he pulled the curtain back. We looked behind and got some insight here as St. Joe's, like he said, one of the high major programs going to play anyone, going to bring a unique style. It's super exciting. And you do have a passionate fan base, Coach. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Follow him on Twitter at John Griffin III. Coach, thank you so much for a few minutes.
Thank you.
Best of luck this year. We're really looking forward to watching St. Joe's. Thank you for taking a moment on our stop as we go across the country.
And good luck.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mike. Thanks.